Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of season 3 of GameSense. We're all glad that you guys are here. We can't wait to talk some robots with everybody. We're wicked excited to be here, and mostly because of our generous sponsor, Symbotic. If it wasn't for them, we couldn't do all the cool things that we do with all the different shows that we make here for GameSense. So to learn more about Symbotic, go to www.symbotic.com. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce all of our hosts. Behind the scenes today is Stephanie Morrison. She's directing. We've got Ruth Toomey sitting in the wings, moderating the chat and helping us out behind the scenes. Joining me on camera today is Evan Morrison from Team 5803, Naveed Shaffer from Team 5803, Ty Tremblay from Team 319.
Hey, guys.
And our guest for this week, James Comstock. James, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm an alumni of Team 1523 from Jupiter, Florida, and now I'm a mentor of Team 179, the Children of the Swamp, the only champions of this game so far, along with our alliance partners 4451 and 1369.
Humble brag, humble brag.
Not to mention, James is also currently the leader in the Fantasy First leaderboard. And I want to say it seems kind of sketchy that 179 picked 4451, considering that was your top fantasy pick.
Technically, if I would have been number one, I would have picked my team, but they were taken from me right before.
Well, everybody Illuminati has been confirmed, I suppose. So, all right, well, before we get started, I want to let everybody watching know that we're going to do the show for about an hour, and then after that, we're going to have a Q&A session where the four of us and James are going to talk about questions you've sent into the chat. So if you have a question, send it via the Twitch chat using the GameSense chatbot. Just type !Q, then your question, and it will get sent to us automatically and get saved. Just let everybody else know as well, because the API behind the Blue Alliance and First changed this year, the other functional GameSense bot are not currently functional, but we hope to have them up for the next show. All right, so before we get started as well, I want to let everyone know that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we hope that you don't either. Have fun, and if you don't like what we have to say, go out there and prove us wrong. We love it. Tonight we're talking about the first week of First Stronghold. We've already learned a lot from Week 0 and Week 0.5, and we even have our first teams qualify for the championships, as James subtly mentioned. To start us off, let's go around the horn and check everybody's first impressions for 2016. Ty, take it away. What are your first impressions of this year's game?
Oh, man. When I saw the reveal from this game, I was super, super excited because my favorite game for years has been 2004 with all the different things that you had to do. And this looked like it was right up that alley. And I think Week 0 and Week 0.5 really showed that. It showed that teams were, they didn't come into the first week sussing out the best strategy already. They had to play a few matches and get into the swing of things, and they really had to play the game in order to figure the game out, and I love that.
Cool. Interesting. Evan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a really fantastic game to watch through the season. The biggest thing that I saw, to go off what Ty mentioned, is we saw a lot of strategic innovation sort of almost as the first event progressed, and I hope that this season is going to be a lot like 2014, where we see new strategic variants all the way through championships, just because of how many options and how strategically deep it is, and I think we're going to see the metagame shift as we get later in the season as well.
Very cool. I hope so too. Naveed, give us your thoughts.
I really like the game too. I'm going to argue that consistency is almost more important in Stronghold than it was in Recycle Rush. And because of the brutality of driving over these defenses and the slight hiccups on crossing any of the defenses, if you get stuck in a match, or if you burn out a motor, or you have some sort of wire that jiggles loose during the match, that's going to really affect you. And more than just a win is at stake in every qualification match, and you can get really far behind if you're not able to perform every single match.
Very good point. I like it. All right, so my thoughts are a little less strategic, unfortunately, even though this is a strategy and tactics show here, but I gotta say, I love the way that this game looks on the field. I was really hoping it would all come together,
Yep.
especially all the, like having the tower, having all the defenses be in not bright colors, but colored and painted and looking great. And when I was at week 0 when GameSense helped to put on the broadcast of the official week 0 event. I saw them putting up these little like castle bumps. I don't know what the official word is. There's some word for it, but little castle bumps on the thing. And I was like, oh, what are those for? I don't remember those. Like, oh, just to look good. So you got to appreciate swag when you can see it, especially on a first field. All right, James, what are your thoughts for week 1?
Well, I didn't compete in week 1, but
Oh,
for the game in general.
The other week, yes. The game in general, yes, sir.
It's interesting that like my initial response was very positive. I like shooting games. I did not like Recycle Rush. Shocker there. I didn't like it. That's such an odd opinion. But one of my favorite things about this game was actually shown in one of our matches. We were going undefeated, and then we go through our auto, and we broke down, lost comm, couldn't do anything. And 2 robots who couldn't even score the game piece were able to score up enough points to not only get us a win, but get us that extra ranking point. This is a throwback game to just a nice, robust drivetrain can technically get up to 40 points in a qual match or 60 points in an elimination match. Just something with wheels can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good point. And I think that we'll definitely see that as the weeks go on. But first, before we go to the future, let's take a look and see what's already happened. So, James, out of the 5 of us, you were there at Palmetto, otherwise known as week 0.5. Tell us, who were some of your top performers there?
Well, obviously 179.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you give us a little bit more? Why do you guys think you did well? I mean, obviously you won because we won matches, therefore we won. But like, what was your secret? What do you think made you guys good?
A constantly evolving strategy. Basically, we went in, we're like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and then we noticed, okay, a lot of teams didn't realize some of the nuances to the game, so we had to kind of play teacher, play catch up, and that's expected at everybody's first event. But if you actually were like watching throughout the qualification matches, we were always up there, but because we had a few matches where we didn't get the breach, we were falling down the rankings out of the top 2 or 3. So we started trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to guarantee us that extra ranking point while making it so that way our opposing alliances didn't get it. And that was done through a very, very in-depth statistical analysis of which defenses teams were crossing, how long it took for them to cross, and stuff like that. We didn't rely on the whole, just pick stuff that's tall. We didn't rely on the whole, just pick something, it doesn't really matter where it goes. And one of the most important things that we noticed is there are certain defenses that certain teams can cross, but they can't score after crossing them. So if we put them in key locations, they can cross, but then they can't do their auto scoring.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's a very smart move. Makes a lot of sense. So what were some of the other teams there that really kind of stood out?
Our first pick, 44-51.
Duh.
If there was, like in football, an MVP award given to the winning team, it would be 44-51. They were the only robot in that first seed alliance that functioned every single match, did exactly what it needed to, and just kind of rolled with the punches. It was very funny to speak to our coach afterwards when we had our finals match where we got stranded on the moat. And he was like, I literally told him right before the match, the moat's no problem for us. We can handle it. Don't be worried. And so when we got stranded there, he's like, I really don't want to go over and tell him that we got stranded on the moat. We need to get pushed. That's getting to be so annoying. And one of the reasons why they were our first pick was that reliability. They would always go through the low bar, get to the end, turn, and then get the high goal. I can't hear you.
No, I'm muted. Oh, that's why. All right. Well, first episode, everybody. So give me a break. I know. So the first one of the teams that really struck me when I was watching them was 1296. Anybody want to talk about them a little bit?
The little robot that could.
I love that robot.
Everybody loves Mittens.
Wait,
honestly,
Mittens?
they called their robot Mittens.
That's adorable.
Honestly, if 1296 didn't care, just flat out didn't care about balls until they had a breach.
Yep.
They would talk solely about the breach. I think if they can get a lot more hours on that robot and really fine tune their driving and really get that under control, because it looked like they were overturning a few times and moving. And honestly, it might even have been they just weren't used to how fast that robot really is. I think they can be crazy dangerous because they put up, I think they got a breach in at least 7 out of 8 matches, right? Or was it all 8 of their qualification matches?
It was pretty close to all of them. It was a very, very deliberate strategy, and honestly, one that I'm not surprised more teams were trying, or maybe they were and just weren't nearly as successful. But boy, that robot was fast, and it was fast at breaching. And a couple of drivetrain issues away from probably putting up a really strong fight in finals against the 179 and 4451 alliance. Not that it wasn't already a strong fight, but it just goes to show when of the top 3 robots we've talked about so far, 2 of them had breakdowns at least at some point in the weekend. This game is brutal. It really, really is.
Oh yeah, it's wicked.
And sometimes it's going to come down to more about who's working at the end.
Yeah, I think what I heard was 1296 burnt out 1 or 2 775 pros on their drive base. I don't know if you can confirm that, James, or not, but
that that was the rumor going around.
Okay.
And that was the smell everyone smelled if you were close enough to the field.
Gotcha. Well, the thing that there was a pretty big takeaway from that, I think, in terms of early events, that you really shouldn't be worrying about trying to get those cycles in qual matches. I mean, 1296 shows that you can get breached fast enough that you may even have, if you've got a decent robot like they did, to be able to get the breach done quick enough and have time for a couple cycles into the logo, perhaps. But that ranking point, that additional ranking point, is so important, and so many teams in a lot of matches came like 1 cross shy of getting that breach.
Yeah, and as you sort of talk about the breaches there, let's go on to our next topic as we talk about the outer works and how it all is going to work. Hey, Ty, why don't you lead us off?
Sure. I think going off of what Naveed was saying, I think people at Palmetto actually kind of underestimated the power of that breach, and it wasn't until they saw the power or until 179 played with them and told them about the power that you actually noticed a distinct change, like either just before lunch or just after lunch, where teams just started talking about the defenses. You know, every game up until now has been so much about take object, score object, get points, win game, where this one actually, it forces you into other directions. And honestly, the game object really isn't worth that many points this year.
Well, yeah,
it's an interesting.
Go ahead, Evan.
Sorry, I've got some lag on my end for some reason.
Problem.
It's an interesting dynamic between quals and playoffs, and I'm really interested to hear James' thoughts on this. Because there's some robots. I mean, Mittens from 1296 is certainly one of them, but there were a few others that were very specifically designed with breaching in mind, and they did it, and that was their goal. And then once you start trying to build a playoff alliance, the individual robot's ability to do a solo breach becomes, I think, a little bit less important, because you can handpick teams, and if you play your cards right, you can end up with an alliance which is very robust at doing a breach as an alliance, even though one individual robot may not be a specialist in it. And so I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but I think that was a large reason for why you guys were looking at 4451 for that alliance. Is you knew in playoffs that those balls started to become important, because you could basically rely on them and you to get a breach as a team.
James, do you want to respond to that?
Sorry, I was lagging a little bit.
That's okay.
I was just waiting for it to catch up. You're on the right track there. Basically, there was only one real defense that we had issues with, and if you watch our matches, you'll figure out which one it was. And 4451 handled that defense whenever it would come up, and that's kind of why if you watch all of the elimination matches, we picked the exact same set of defenses for our opponents, because kind of the reverse happened from the qual matches, where in the qual matches we were figuring out which defense everybody had the most issues with, and by the time elimination alliances were formed, whether by purpose or on accident, every alliance could breach. There was you could not put forth 5 defenses where they couldn't cross 4 of them. So we basically made the decision of we were going to go short in eliminations to give us that better visibility, because it didn't matter what we were putting in front of them; they were going to handle it either way.
And you were the number 1 seed and had a little bit more firepower.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's that.
Yeah.
the ability to outscore them on balls when all else is equal is, and the hanging too. I think certainly part of 179's a large part of their strategy is to get those extra 10 points, and boy, that really helps when push comes to shove in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think something else sort of to touch on, going back to what Ty said a few minutes ago, is that Ty, I think you're mostly right about the game pieces not being worth as many points, especially in the qualification matches. But what's really interesting is that really this is like the first year in a while we've had, I still have this opinion, this is the first year we've had like 2 different kinds of game pieces, right? Mm-hmm. We have these balls that you put into a goal, and we have these defenses that you have to cross. And I think that if you're not looking at the defenses as something that you can utilize as a resource, you're looking at it wrong for sure. But anyway, I know that James, you mentioned a little bit about visibility. Ty, you were at week 0 and you coached. Can you talk a little bit about visibility as well?
Yeah. Just close your eyes and hope that you win the game. Really, if there is a port, if there's a Sadly port or a drawbridge out there,
Sadly port,
and you have a short robot, then you can't see the robot on the other side, and then it doesn't matter what defense is on the other side, you can't see balls on the other side of the defenses. So we did actually ended up doing the exact same thing when 319 went into the matches that we were playing in week 0. We were just like, hey, look, we're not really trying to win anything here at week 0. We're all just trying to practice. So we're just going to pick the lowest the lowest defenses we can, so that we could possibly see what was going on here. And I think that that's going to be, honestly, I think that the teams that solve this visibility issue the best are going to have a bigger competitive advantage than we think. I think being able to see or get around seeing those defenses is going to be huge. What do you think, James?
To go into both visibility and breaching, the team that actually solved that visibility issue the best was probably 1296. They had a 20-foot PVC pipe attached to their driver station with a camera on top of it, looking down on the field so they could see. So
I was wondering if somebody would actually do it.
We built one, we just never wound up using it.
Yeah, by week 3, how many of those are we going to see on driver stations?
Can I pipe in? I think 0, but that's maybe because week 2 we'll see hundreds or something.
I don't know. I mean, it's a good idea. I think
agree.
and you end up playing the game maybe a little bit like a video game, which at a lot of times kind of is what 1296 looked like, just flipping and spinning and doing all their tricks. But yeah, I think, and I want to touch on something that was a topic on Chief Delphi for a long time, which was talking about the percentage of teams that built low bar robots, low bar capable robots. And then this infamous quote now from Karthik about the results of that poll, that 90% of the teams on Chief Delphi, or at least 90% of the representatives of teams on Chief Delphi, were saying that they were designing a low bar robot, and Karthik found that terrifying, which spawned an entire thread in itself. And I think a big part of that I'm not sure anybody actually picked up on was most of the team probably weren't thinking a thing about vision. When we look at the field, when we're designing robots, most teams aren't thinking about it from a driver's perspective. They're thinking about it from what they see in the stands or the field video, etc. And the number of robots that just are going to be so much less effective than they were designed to be simply because their drivers cannot see their robot on the other side of the field. You can have the greatest shooter mechanism in the world, but if you can't see where you're aiming it and you don't have good camera tracking, good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 319 actually went through and we actually made renders of what the field looks like with various defense setups from the driver station position. And as soon as we saw that, we started thinking, oh, what if we had a flexible like fiberglass pole with some flags on it, or how do we solve this problem? Because it's going to become a bigger problem than people think. Sorry, James, to cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, it's just real quick. One thing that I think FRC could potentially do later on in the season is actually an edit to the driver station. If you all remember in 2014, they had those little screens that would show you which robots touched in which zone, so you could get the full 30. If they just had a little screen that showed how many breaches were on each defense already, or crossings, that would help tremendously in just translating to teams. Hey, we need to go to defense 3, 4, 2. And it's on both sides, so it doesn't give anybody an unfair advantage.
Yeah. I mean, there's defense combinations where you can't even see the lights on from a certain player station so they're there so you can tell what defense you've crossed, but you can't see it. Sorry.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I was gonna say I noticed in even several of your guys' matches that there were a couple times where you were that one cross away from getting the breach, and you'd either go to score a goal or try and hang at the last minute. Were those intentional or a visibility issue, perhaps?
From our visibility was part of it, but also in the early matches in Palmetto, just to getting through the bugs and the jitters, the referees were missing some crossings, and that's threw off some teams. But for the most part, it was also getting used to the idea of yes, a win is 2 qualification points, but we're probably going to win anyway, so let's get that other one to get 3.
Cool. Yeah, so as we I think we've kind of talked about the outer works quite a bit, and I'm sure that's the strategies behind it, and everything's going to change and evolve as time goes on. I can't wait to see what kind of 10,000 combinations get thrown into it. But let's move on to our next topic, which is all about autonomous mode. Evan, what are your thoughts about autonomous mode in this game, as we've seen from week 0 and from week 0.5?
I think autonomous mode is going to be, for one, it's absolutely critical, especially as we move later in the season. Getting those extra points, I mean, it's always huge, right? But it's a lot harder, I think, than teams are giving credit for. And not just in terms of going and scoring a ball and a goal after autonomous, but just getting across a defense reliably and not getting stuck. There's a huge, huge risk for a lot of teams that are trying to go across it. I think I was impressed, for one, of the number of teams that had functional autonomous modes that scored points.
Oh, yeah.
But I hope that every team is able to put some kind of autonomous mode in there. Reaching is honestly harder in some respects because you really, really, really gotta either have confidence that your robot's not gonna get stuck, or have some kind of sensor. Because I'm worried for my team going into this next weekend. We haven't finished a working autonomous mode yet, and just if you can't get the robot to drive straight, if you end up sideways in the middle of the moat, or on a ramparts and high centered or something, because you tried it and all of a sudden you're done for the match in autonomous. So I'm really interested to see what that evolves into.
Something that stemmed from reveal night last night was 1986 showed that they had 25 autonomous modes. And then you think that blows your mind, and then you think about it for another 30 seconds and you realize that this is a game that almost needs 25 autonomous modes. You've got 5 different positions for defenses, 4 of which can change all the time. So you've got to be able to go over which defense in which position and then aim in which direction for the high or the low goal. And it's
which
just
goal.
Right, and which goal. And it's a really complicated problem to solve, but I think that they weighted the scoring values well in that aspect.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Naveed.
I was going to say also, I think it's more than just getting those points in auto. The fact where we saw some of those qual matches where all three teams crossed a defense, even if they weren't scoring a ball after that, you are now already well along your way, almost halfway to a breach. And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think
179 would go around and they would turn right back around and come over the defense, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the smartest auto modes I saw all weekend.
yeah, James, why did you guys try that? Why did you guys go in that route?
Basically, it was a discussion of like once we realized when at first we thought like everybody else like, oh, if I can cross like 4 defenses in auto, then I'm good and I'll be great. But then we, the whole only the first one counts, and then we realized it doesn't matter where you really wind up. If you get the cross, you get the cross. So we're like, okay, if we turn around and we get back to that line, it's kind of like autonomouses that people ran in 2013, including our team, where they would start, drive forward, get the goal, turn around, and get back to that midline to get to the feeder station. Except for now, your scoring piece is right in front of you on that midline.
It's a very smart move. Yeah. I wonder if the plethora of, at least at Palmetto, we'll see what week 1 has to bring for us, but the large number of teams that had actually working autonomous modes, I got to say, this has got to be one of the top years I've ever seen for working autos in the first week of competition. I wonder if that has to do with the increased focus on the drive line, right? If more of your resources go into driving, do you think teams focus on that, or maybe it's a little bit of an easier challenge so they can actually get an autonomous mode working? I don't know. Just a thought.
It's similar to the to 2014, where if you just drove forward, you got 5 points.
Yeah.
This year, you can, if you drive forward and you don't like get far enough, you still get 2, and if you get far enough, you get 10.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've talked a good amount about autonomous mode. Let's talk as Ty spins it. Oh, there's Ty's back. All right, cool. Let's go over and talk about the tower and how that plays into the game, especially with captures and hanging and all that fun stuff. Evan, why don't you take this one away?
Didn't I just talk about?
You weren't supposed to say that. You weren't supposed to say that.
You got me. All right.
Behind the scenes is supposed to be behind the scenes, Evan.
Come on.
No, but yeah, I think, and it's interesting because this game, as you watch it visually, for a very large portion of the match, the focus is entirely on the outer works for a lot of the teams that we saw week half. And I think that'll change as we get later in the season and teams get more proficient at shooting. That'll really be a full half court of action. But until that point, it was really just like, okay, breaching, and everybody's going for the tower, and then you check the score, and you see, well, did they get enough for a capture? No, okay, right? And then it's, are they going to hang or not? It's interesting. The dynamic is interesting. I think captures are right about where I expected them to be in terms of difficulty at this point in the season. I think that they'll definitely get more frequent by championships. I think we'll start seeing them in qualification matches with favorable pairings. But there's a lot of pieces that need to fall into place to get a capture. We saw it, like a handful of times the whole weekend. And
what I was going to add on.
Sorry, I can't hear everybody.
Go on ahead, Naveed.
What I was going to add on to that too is we see at the beginning of an event, and I think we're going to continue to see that the next couple weeks, is as teams are trying to get that breach and are really making sure that they can get that in the win, they sacrifice getting those cycles in. And if you don't have those cycles, you aren't going to get the tower into a position where you're going to be able to get the capture. Yeah,
I think Naveed, you hit it right on the head. I think that a lot of teams are really focusing, are at least focusing on there's the two parts to this. Like you said, there's we want to get the breach, we want to get those points. But early on in the event, especially at a very early week like week 0.5, you'll see a lot of teams go for what I like to call the magical Christmas land strategy, right? Like maybe if they haven't been to a week 0 or they haven't tested the robot fully, they go into the event and the robot's done, but they want to do everything that they said that they could do when they started the season. So you see a lot of teams shooting and missing widely, or you'll see teams having difficulties picking up, or you'll see teams having difficulties crossing some of the more complicated defenses. Because and they'll do it for multiple matches because they're trying to just get the robot fixed and going. And that's at least something I notice a lot at a lot of early events, especially in non-district areas, because you don't necessarily have the incentive to abandon ship more quickly, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think we read the numbers. We looked at the numbers on the Blue Alliance. I believe there were 4 captures the entire event. Does that sound about right, James?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
all of
there
them
were
in
only
eliminations,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of them in eliminations.
There was one qual match where I think it was an alliance with 2,200.
And
Was able to bring
51.
Yeah, were able to bring the tower down to like -3 or 4, but they couldn't get all 3 robots up on the batter.
Yeah, and that's actually something I want to touch on real quick. It's actually surprisingly, I shouldn't say surprisingly difficult, but it's more difficult than I thought it would be, especially I saw this at week 0, to actually plant yourself on the batter, especially if you have big wheels, like a lot of teams do. You end up sort of, the big wheels, you go up, you'll have the sticks hard forward, and as you let go, the robot rolls down and off the batter. So
yeah, you'd think it's surprisingly, sorry. The ramp on the ramp parts are much harder. No, I don't even know what
the batter.
name
It's
of
called
it
the
is.
batter.
The batter.
Yes.
Hey, batter.
Yeah, the big rampy thing at the bottom of the tower is actually steeper than I expected. And then the cleat, because everybody chose big wheels to get over the defenses, it almost doesn't matter. You think, oh yeah, we'll hit that cleat, we'll bounce off of it, and we'll be good right there. And then you realize that the cleat, while it would be big for a 4-inch wheel, is, for your monster truck tires, is fiddlesticks.
Yes.
What we noticed a lot was teams would drive up and then they turn 90 degrees so they wouldn't slide down. The issue you have with that is if you try to get 3 robots to do that, you're going to wind up on top of each other, which is why teams that have a climber like us, 1876, 2200, we all can, if we get up there first, second, third, it doesn't matter. As long as we can engage and climb, only one robot now needs to turn at the end, and we have enough space.
To talk about scaling, we only saw, I think from what TBA said, 41 scales throughout the entire weekend, which was about 7% of all total possible opportunities for teams to scale. What I'm curious is this something that's just because of our team pool at Palmetto and the timing in the season, or do we think that we're going to see at most regional and district events scaling to be around 10%, perhaps?
Well, I think you hit a good point. I think it's a combination of factors, but I think that scaling is one of those things that's not. How do I put it? I guess it's. From what I could say, I don't think a lot of teams put a lot of emphasis on it. I definitely think you see a lot more robots that have shooters but don't have scalers than robots that have scalers and don't have shooters. So I think at this point in the season, development on those systems is very limited. So teams haven't gotten them to a point where they're effective at scaling yet. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a perfect storm of factors here. One is that it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not worth that many more points than a challenge. And as we just talked about, challenging is a little bit more difficult than a lot of teams expected.
A little bit more challenging.
Yeah, but I think the what's the word? The desire to build low bar robots very strongly influenced, and negatively influenced the desire of teams to try and build challenging.
It made the design challenge much more difficult.
Yeah, it's a very.
No.
All right, we're done. Nope. But yeah, I think a lot of teams saw the opportunity that the low bar afforded them as a better return on investment than a scaling mechanism, right? That the ability to cross that defense for points, for breaching, the ease that it would make an autonomous mode, especially one that's trying to shoot into the high goal consistently. Like, there's so many advantages you get from the low bar that While there is certainly definitely advantages from scaling, it's not as immediately obvious to a team that's trying to figure out what they're going to design the robot to do.
I would like to rebut that and say that scaling is really, really hard, regardless of the type of robot you build. And it's only worth 10 points, you know? Like, you go up there, you've got 5 points, you build this thing that can lift your 150-pound robot and hold it up there after a match and do so in less than 20 seconds. And you do all that, and you go up there and you climb, and you get up there, and you lose 5 points and gain 15. And it's like, I just don't think it was worth it. I think the reason you're seeing so few is because teams are actually applying the engineering approach of cost and effectiveness, and they're just saying, look, this is a really hard problem, and we're not getting a lot out of it.
I think I will rebut the rebuttal.
Ooh,
I will say that we may not have seen it as much in Palmetto, but I think that 10-point addition is going to be enough of a game changer for some of the teams who have climbers, especially in weeks 1 through 3. Because when we're looking at the match scores, Palmetto, I think the average match score was around 68 or so, if I might say. And if you've got a breach plus maybe some points in auto, 10 plus points might be enough to give you a little bit of bump up and get that margin that you need to win a match.
Yeah, and I want to go off what you said about winning a match, because through all of this, you can lose sight of the fact that winning a match is still worth more ranking points than breaching. And as we get right now, I think it's few and far between, and it's a definite advantage for the teams that can do it, as 179 showed. But the teams that were able to scale at Palmetto were also the teams that were just in general very prepared.
Yeah, I wanted this to sort of say that, to go back to what you were saying earlier about the low bar, not to fanboy a little bit, but James, I thought your team's robot reveal video was like the most adorable thing ever, with the shooter kind of popping in and out of the chassis to give yourselves a little bit of extra room. What was your guys' design process when it came to figuring out how to climb and how to fit it all inside under the low bar?
Well, funny enough, we were having this discussion at our meeting last night where we ironically accidentally proved that a tall robot can win and rank first because we never utilized that feature in any match in Palmetto. We never dropped our hood down and went under the low bar. There was There was always, you go watch all of our matches, there was always at least one robot on our alliance who could just do that for us. So we always took the advantage of, okay, that's going to get done for us one way or another, so we're going to tackle the other 3 defenses we need to cross. So the most impressive and advantageous and completely out there design feature that we had, never had to use it.
Oh, you're the lowest tall bot of them all.
Yep. But when we were thinking about number one, to go from the how many of the scaling robots are we going to see? If you watched the reveal night last night, there was 40 some odd robots, and I think the Twitch chat counted 8 or 9 who actually showed scaling in the video. That's only 20% of those videos, and that's teams that actually had the time, the resources, and the energy to shoot a video. So I think that the 10 to 15 is probably going to be about what we're going to see at most events, at least regional, not district, where you're going to see that kind of go. And our design process in choosing to scale was, from a points perspective, yes, it's only 10 more than a challenge. But if we scale, we have now equaled all 3 of those robots challenging. So if we just get one robot to park there, we have that 5-point swing to the other side.
Yeah, and that's a really important point too, is that, you know, being able to, in many games, you don't have to try to score the most points. You just have to score more than the other guy. So if you know you can beat him on the breach, you can beat him in the goal. If you can beat him on the batter, then that means that probably means you're going to beat him in the match.
That's kind of the thought process going into the do we scale or not. And then we kind of laughed when we had our design all the way done, and then West Coast Products showed the same drivetrain that we were going to use, the same scalar design that we were pretty much going to use. It was just hilarious to us that we're like, they're going to think we copied this.
Yep.
And we have it built sitting here. This is awkward.
Oh, well, so there's this other thing that the tower has, unless anybody wants to talk more about hanging or scaling. before we move on. There's one other thing that this tower has. There are these holes at the top and the bottom that the boulders go through. Let's talk a little bit about high goal versus low goal. I want to start off the conversation by saying if you go to if by the way, anybody watching, go to thebluealliance.com and go to Palmetto or any of the events that are going to happen this week. There's a really cool tab there called Insights. It's got a lot of really great information. If you look at there, you'll see at Palmetto that there were more high goals scored than there were low goals scored. Doesn't that blow your mind? Guys, what do we... No? Really?
No.
Why do you say that, Evan?
I agree.
It would have up until we did driver practice from the perspective. And low goals...
You're going to have to
Hey,
plug
Evan,
in.
we're losing you. Make sure you're plugged in.
He's
Do you have
being
a
beat
loose
off
wire?
by the low goalers.
Are we okay now?
Yes, we're good. We're all good.
All right. Man, I'm just pulling all the issues today. It's the perspective is incredibly difficult, right? You're across the field. You're low down, so right there you probably can't see what you're doing. You don't have a center low goal, right? So you're always coming in from the edge. So you're dealing with perspective, right? And you've got the angle of the batter, which, as we all mentioned, is a little bit steeper in practice than I think a lot of teams really realized if they didn't build it and test it. And so where you end up is, if you put the time and the thought into doing it, you're probably already spending your time going for the high goal, right? And what we saw were the top teams shot in the high goal and did it successfully. And 1296 was basically one of the only robots, them and 2200, that had purpose-built low goal mechanisms that were practiced enough to actually make use of it. And everybody else found out very quickly that it doesn't matter where you're putting the ball. If you did not plan and don't have any kind of vision or sight or anything over there, you're going to have a hard time.
And I'll add one more thing to that, too. I will say a reason we saw more high goals than low goals is even if you've got the breach, you're almost better off going for a defense than a low goal because it's something that might even be somewhat easier, and the point value. I mean, unless you're shooting it high and you can do that reliably and quickly, it's worth it to keep clearing defenses.
Right, unless you think you can get a tower capture out of it, then those 2 points it becomes a really hard choice of, do I keep going for these cycles, or do I get the early breach and the extra 10 points from the 5th defense?
I think it'll become much less of an issue as the season progresses, though, when breaches happen so fast that you can either start focusing on the cycles because you know you'll get the breach, or because you've got the breach done so early that you have enough time to weaken the tower.
Yeah, and I think definitely as the season goes on, we'll see more cycles, including, because in a perfect world, you want to carry a ball over the other side as you're crossing a defense, get the defense, get your breach on, and score the ball, right? And I think you guys hit it on the head when it comes to scoring the high goal. It's a lot faster to complete that cycle if you can shoot it and get it into the high goal effectively, if you just shoot it from distance or without having to get into it too close. So, anyway.
Especially if you have somebody like we had, which was 1369. If they're over on that other side, and if you watch their defensive play, they're not traveling out and trying... They're hanging out right near that batter and just basically playing a zone defense. If you need to get to that batter high or low goal, high goalers have the chance to try to shoot it long and not deal with it. Low goalers have to get there. That's why the 2200 alliance, I can't remember, it was them, 120, and I think 2386, I want to say. Two of their robots were low goalers. Hey, got it right. Go me. So if you can just stop them from getting there, that capture's not going to happen. We don't even have to worry about them getting the extra 25 points. And there's no way for you to do teams have shown it, but realistically, you're not going to try to shoot a low goal from distance.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so speaking of 1369, Naveed, why don't we go into our next topic, and why don't you start us off talking about alliance selection, the great equalizer, and one of the coolest parts probably of Stronghold coming out of week 0.5. Take us away.
So after last season Recycle Rush's seeding method, I thought we're not going to be able to top that. And I still don't think we topped it, but I think the seeding system looks actually pretty great. I think that all of the top tier alliances seemed reasonable, and while some people on paper might have seen that 4451 may or may not be the right pick in terms of scoring potential, they were absolutely the right pick for 179, and it goes back to what Evan was talking about earlier. You're not necessarily looking to get the most breaching done or having a single robot that's able to do all of that by themselves. You're looking to put together this comprehensive alliance. And I think, as in most games, that first pick is always fairly obvious. I mean, it comes down to who is going to help you put the most points on the board. The thing that I'm most excited about, and I don't think we saw quite enough of it just yet, is what you're looking for in that third robot. We did see 1369 play some really great defense on 179's alliance, and I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your thought process behind picking them.
So, as some people have joked on Delphi, we participated in Phone Gate, where our driver pulled out his phone, and
There's nothing wrong with that, though.
No, there's not. It's like, I think there was a response, like a Q&A from like 2007 or something, and they're like, yeah, sure, that's fine, as long as you don't hold up the process. And basically what it was is we met up with 4451 before alliance selection because we knew we were going to be number one. We wanted to talk to them and make sure they weren't going to say no to us because that would be really awkward. And we made a list of like 10 teams. Like, okay, one of these 10 is going to be around for the other side, and 1369 was on that list of 10. So we're teams like 2614, 4533, I think it was, which is Wando, and a few others, 3490, Viper Drive. And we just sat there, and like, we go through the initial round, and we're like, oh, that's weird, the alliance selections didn't go exactly how we thought they were. And then all of a sudden, it gets to number 8, and they pick both the 2 from our list. Then it keeps going, and we had 2 left, and so we had them on the same level of pick one of these 2. So our driver's kind of standing there, and he's like talking to 4451, and they're like, we want to go with 1369, but they wanted to get confirmation from people who had stats, which one do we go with? So the phone conversation went, he calls, his dad picks up, he hands the phone over to me, and I'm like, hey, so what are you guys thinking? They're like, 1369. I'm like, yeah, they play good defense, let's go with that. That was the extent of the conversation. It was a 10 to 15 second phone call.
Yep. Well, I mean, not to touch on the phone thing too much, but I don't, if somebody points out the rule where it's illegal, I'm sure they'll be happy to follow the rules, but I don't think that's such a thing. I think it's a myth. In fact, I know it's a myth. But moving on. So what were you looking for in alliance partners? Why were you picking these robots? Were you just looking for more people to put balls in goals, or was putting the robots over the defenses more important, or what was it in between?
Basically, we knew, despite what happened in that finals match with the Moat, that B and D defense we can handle. So we were looking at, okay, we need somebody with a low bar autonomous, and we need somebody who can handle one of the 2 category A's, which is the Portcullis, because we can handle the Cheval. And so when we took all that into consideration, we had 3 robots lined up. We had 4451, 3824, and 2393. 2393, whether through only because that's all they could handle or the actual flow of a match, they pretty much stuck to just going through that low bar, not really tackling anything else. So 4451, 3824, it came down to reliability to select them. It was who could be reliable, and we kind of proved that when 4451 was the only member of our alliance who never broke down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's, just not to cut you off, but it's so important that teams take that into consideration with their alliance, because these robots are going to get beat up, and they're going to get beat up even more in playoffs. And just taking into consideration that, well, one robot may have more of an upside than another. If it's not reliable, or if you've seen a few breakdowns, make sure you go talk to that team, find out what's wrong, etc. Because it will come back to bite you. I guarantee it.
Naveed, you were going to say something before we went to Evan?
Not really. I think it pretty much got covered. I was just going to say, on top of all of that, on top of the data and the rationale 4451 is great to work with, and especially their coach, David Allred. Always nice working with that team.
Well, that's good to hear. Cool. So, real quick, I know you guys talked about strategically picking defenses. When you talked about it for the eliminations, it was mostly just so you could make sure you could see and play your game. Is that correct, James?
Correct.
Okay. Did you guys ever think about trying to figure out who could get blocked, or did it end up not working out that way?
Like not be able to go over a defense, or
I should
like
say-
what do you mean by blocked?
Well, I should say you guys. I meant you mentioned at the top of the show. You guys were looking to see who could cross what defenses and what defenses they couldn't cross. When it came to the end, were the alliances able to cross everything, or was it just more important that you could play your game better?
Basically, it was when we broke down like a statistical analysis of what the alliances were capable of. Among the 3 robots, there was no, at least with the alliances we went up against, there was no real combination that we could say none of them can cross that defense. So it became a matter of, from our perspective, we need to be able to see better, especially if it comes down to trying to hunt down a ball to get that final goal for a capture. So we went short and we subbed out moat and ramparts depending on the alliance, but we never really thought one of the tall alliances like the drawbridge or the portcullis was better than the cheval and the sallyport in terms of slowing down our opponents.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. Cool. All right. Well, before we move on from alliance selection, any last thoughts before we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, I have one more thing that I want to sort of muse on. And we've seen this in past years. It's been a while since we've had a game, I think since 2013, where you could build an alliance of 3 cyclers. And by and large, what we'll probably see in the first few weeks, as is kind of typical, is that third pick is going to be defense. Mainly because it's really hard to find teams that fit that role of a third cycler. But I am kind of curious when we get to the district championships and championships if that's going to be a viable alternative of just try and outshoot them and outscore them and leave the defense behind to some degree. And I don't know the answer yet.
I would hazard to say you're right. I mean, especially if you're that number 1 seed and you're able to get enough firepower with your first and second robot, it may be worth it.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see how this sort of greater game of picks and choose what strategy you're going to play comes to pass as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right,
a
so
lot
now-
of teams are working on or are saying that the cheesecake of this year is the 4'6" tall blocker or the wall that they can put on the third robot. But I think that we're going to find that, limiting the way that these robots can drive around the field is going to be really detrimental. And it may, like you guys said, be worth it to have a robot that can just quickly jet through the low bar and jump onto that last second capture. Then it, maybe more important to do that than to block 4 or 5 shots from the other alliance.
That's true. That's true. All right, so we're going to go to our last topic before we go to shout-outs. We're going to touch on this really quick. So if you haven't been following the latest and greatest on Chief Delphi, and from team update number 14, you may have seen a change to one of the rules. It was a little weird. If you have been following, forgive me, I'm going to explain a little bit. Basically, from what has been said, Team 900, the Zebracorns, brought a second robot frame thing, not robot, and bagged it with them on bag day and brought it to Palmetto because they had literally no chance to practice because it was the event was 2 days after they finished their robots. And so they brought the robot to the event and they had basically a full set of spare parts to use at the event.
Well, it was more than just brought it, Francis. They bagged it.
Yes, correct.
It was
They bagged
it was officially and legally bagged. At which point it doesn't count towards the withholding allowance, and any number of things. And for them, it made sense to bag a practice robot. They didn't bag it at the end of the event, but when bag day is Tuesday and load-in is the very next day, really, what are you going to do with a practice robot at that point?
Yeah, you can't really practice anything. So, but this brings up another interesting point. at rule update number 14 seems to potentially, probably make this particular strategy against the rules, and has also brought up a more interesting fact that it appears Team 456 did the same thing with their second robot, and they have a third robot that they're at home practicing with. So we don't have a lot of time, so I kind of want to just go around and have everybody give their thoughts on this whole fun time we have with rules and bags. Evan, do you want to start? You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'll start on this. For one, this is not the first time that we've dealt with something like this. Way back in 2008, some dear friends on 1519 built what was considered two robots. They were two mechanisms that both had drivetrains, both fit under the 120-pound weight limit, and a movable electronics box. Combined, yeah, 120 pounds combined, which is impressive, right? And they had a movable electronics box, and depending on who their partners were, they would choose one or the other. First ended up saying, no, that's two robots. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, you got to pick one and go with that. And this was back in the yeah, and you got to burn it, right? It goes
Very
back
medieval.
to this was all the way back in the crate era, right? So it wasn't just like, oh, they bagged two robots and whatever. No, they boxed this whole thing up in a crate and shipped it to the event. So I was a little surprised about the initial ruling on 900 that it wasn't, or that it was legal, because that kind of goes against that precedent. And then the rule update fixes that a little bit, but it starts to bring into this whole big gray area of what exactly does qualify as a robot. And I'll pass it off to some others real quick in a minute here, but the crux of what 456 did is they built a very modular robot that they can essentially tear down into subcomponents and build back up in 10 minutes with two people. And so they built spares of every single mechanism such that it could be assembled into another robot. It doesn't have a control system on it, and they bagged it. And so at that point you say, well, if they just spent 10 minutes taking it apart and put all those spare mechanisms in a bag together, is that not a robot anymore? And now is it legal? So it's an interesting conundrum, and they're like as gray as possible on this spectrum.
Yeah.
So and nothing against the team, by the way. I think what they did was very smart, and at the time of bagging, it was completely legal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Naveed, Tyre, James, do you have any thoughts on this interesting little pickle?
Like, no,
I don't like
it's
lawyering.
no, I don't like the lawyering, but my team had that infamous call in 2014 at Orlando where teams got eliminated and there was all that. So it seems to just follow our team wherever we go, that somebody does something that's, is it the rules, is it not the rules, what's going on?
I see what the problem is now.
Yeah, it's 179, which is, it's all us, which
First
is why
it was
I wish...
tubes on ramps, now it's this.
Yeah. Yeah, quarter inch. So I wish I could find, like, who on first kind of looks at this stuff. This reminds me of, like, the Noodle agreement last year, where it's like, we figured this out pretty quickly. Even my team was like, we're going to build our second robot and just throw it in the bag and bring it with us, and we wound up not doing that because we didn't finish it. But it's like things like when they use terms like reasonably astute observer, like define that for me.
Well, those specific words are like things that you use in a court of law, right? So that's like lawyers in real life use those words to reference things that happen with real important stuff. So I think first it's just trying to basically say, dudes, chill, right? I think that's what they're trying to say, but I don't know. It's really hard to do, especially when you've got, however many 100 or 200,000 heads all going at the same problem at the same time.
Well, it's going to be like, I don't remember who it was who brought it up in the thread, but somebody did something similar, and they were an LRI, and they impounded that robot. So is 456 going to show up, and the LRI is going to walk over, watch them on bag one, and say, pick which one I'm taking, and then walk away with it? Because as much as I love people in first, and I love volunteers, and I love, this whole thing, that's a, potentially $4,000 piece of machine that now I have to leave outside of my team's pit and trust that nobody's going to back into it, nobody's going to make it fall over. That's shaky to me.
Yeah, it's a fun mess that has that's kind of worked its way into the rules by accident. And nothing to knock necessarily the zebra corns or 456 on this, but we'll see what happens as we go forward. So as we bring to the end of our second episode of the season, let's do shout-outs. We're going to basically what we do for shout-outs is each of our hosts and our guests will talk about two teams that they really want to highlight that are competing this week. So
two?
One or two.
Okay.
I
only picked one.
Let's start at the top with Evan. Evan, who's your shout-out this week?
All right. Well, I'm going back to an old favorite. Back in New Hampshire, 131 Chaos. I saw a short reveal on them a few days ago, and they're doing what they do best, which is simple robot that goes up close and puts a ball in the hole. And I just love the simplicity of the robot. It looks great. I know that their drivers are going to be practiced up and ready to go, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them because they've had a lot of really good consistent success with robots like that. So should be fun.
I'd have to say that my shout out of the week will go to none other than 33 the Killer Bees. Apparently, there was a leak earlier in the season by Jimmy Z, not Jim Zondag. I missed the leak, and I am excited to see what they'll be showing us week one. They've always been a team that's strong week one, considering all of Michigan, and I'm especially happy to give them a shout out because they were my first fantasy pick in Michigan. So I got to catch up on James from Palmetto.
You wish.
All right. So I'm going to take it away. My personal shout outs go to two teams. One, 177 the Bobcats. They revealed a few hours ago. Their robot looks solid. I can't wait to see it play, and I hope it gets back to Einstein Brothers for life. All right. Next up, I got to give a shout out to a little rookie team from the Pacific Northwest called 5803. This is, of course, Evan and Stephanie and Naveed's team. You guys, I know you've been putting a lot of work into your season and working with your kids really a lot, and I think you guys have put yourself in a position to be a contender all the way through to the district championship and hopefully the championship. So I wish you guys the best of luck.
Don't curse it, Francis.
Hey, I'm not cursing. I'm saying. I think you could. We got two people behind the scenes. Stephanie, who's yelling at me because I'm jinxing her. Stephanie, she's shouting out to Team 359, the Hawaiian Kids. They're going to be playing up in lovely, chilly Minnesota this weekend. She's looking forward to see how their robot and strategy plays out in week one. I know that if you're friends with Glenn on Facebook, he had some weight issues with the robot earlier, but it seems to have been solved, so it'll be really exciting. And then Ruth, she's looking forward to a New England team, Team 5687, the Outliers. They had a high score at week 0. They're a very bouncy, fun-looking robot, and she's really looking forward to seeing them compete this year. So that's the people behind the scenes and their shout-outs. Ty, what about you?
So the last time that we had a game in where we had multiple things to manipulate and some balls to collect and balls to shoot, Team 67 developed this amazing arm that did pretty much anything. And based on the teaser that they've released in Chief Delphi, it looks like they've come up with another do-it-all arm again. And if the kings of the do-it-all arm have anything to say, it's going to be something interesting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that robot. I know our robot was certainly inspired by their 2012 robot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain that there's many others out there this year who were also inspired by that. So, be fun. Be fun to see what they pull out.
Yeah. All right, James, what are your shout outs?
My big shout out is to 1983 from the Pacific Northwest, Skunkworks.
The Stinkworks.
Once again, I picked them for fantasy first, so hoping they do well. But they're back to back, if I remember correctly, Pacific Northwest champions.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm
they
not
are.
too happy you picked that one up.
They got the Pacific Northwest Chairman's Award last year.
And 6 banners.
Yeah. I was able to toot my own horn. Gonna help Naveed out a little bit, but I'm always excited to see their robots. I feel like going to districts help that team out in terms of gaining even more recognition. And I feel like that's one thing that districts do help with is it really lets the cream rise to the top and show like how good you can do. It's reliable. It'll be quick, hopefully. And I'm just really excited to see it, especially because there's, to my knowledge, no real pictures or video of them.
Nope.
Yep. I can't wait to see him too. It'll be really a real fun one to watch. All right. Well, everybody, that's the end of our show. If you're watching live or if you're watching on YouTube, stay tuned because we're going to have our Q&A with the viewers right after this, after a very short break. So again, if you have a question for us, type !Q, then the question in the Twitch chat, and our chat bot will pull it in for us and send it to us so we can talk about it on air. But before we go, I want to say a big thank you to James. James, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on and doing GameSense. And congratulations to you and all your team for doing a fantastic job before even week 1 started.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sure all my team members appreciate it.
Yeah, and good luck in Fantasy First, except not too much. I want Navy to win.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we'll see everybody in just a moment. But if you're leaving us, then have a good night, and see you real soon. Bye-bye now. Hello, alrighty. Welcome back to GameSense. We're here to do a little Q&A with everybody who's watching out there in internet land. So we got our first question coming up. Again, if you have more questions, just type exclamation point Q and type the question into the Twitch chat and we'll get it automatically. All right, so question 1 coming up right about now. This question was asked by Electronica 1. He asked, how variable were the balls at Palmetto? Well, James, you were at Palmetto. What was your how variable were they?
From what I was seeing, I wasn't out on the field, but I did get to go hang out and stuff, and I got to see some of the balls that were coming off and talk to our drive coach. If by when the match started the tournament started out, they were all obviously the same. It wasn't like we were getting some of the things that we got when we ordered balls ourselves, like there'd be patches of the ball that just didn't have texture and stuff. They all were pretty good at that. As the game went on, it became very apparent to us that if you didn't bring a ball being like damaged to a referee's attention, they were going to let it play until somebody complained. And there were certain things that weren't even like, that was my cat chiming in.
Checking.
Yeah.
All right, just checking.
There were certain things that unless you touched a ball, you wouldn't notice. Like, we noticed this at our week 0 event that we hosted. If a tank tread robot drives over a ball, it actually delaminates it without tearing anything off. So it separates the skin from the actual stuff on the inside.
Nice.
Now, that may not, yeah. So for us, we noticed that it didn't affect our shooter, but it kind of affected how the ball rolled up to the shooter, so it would slow it down. But they didn't get too bad. It's not like the balls are sturdier than they were in 2012, so you're not having like, after a match, okay, 3 of our balls are just gone now. We're going to cycle 3 more in.
Interesting. I expect as the season goes on, and we start seeing more and more shooters, that we're going to start seeing some more 2006 and 2012 like damage, where you're just going to get chunks of or patches of the coating coming off. But the delamination thing is interesting. I don't think we've ever seen that before, and there's a good chunk of teams running tank treads this year, so that'll be something to keep an eye out for.
Oh yeah, cool. All right, we got another question coming up right here right now, and Stephanie says, all right, this question is asked, James, can you talk about shooting from the safe zone and how it wasn't called correctly at Palmetto? I had not heard about that, actually. James, you want to talk about that because he's asking you?
Yeah, so basically what it was once again, this is a week 0.5. Refs are fresh out of training. I have nothing but nice things to say about the volunteers. Everybody was really nice, got along really great with everybody. You know, Southern hospitality was strong, even though we headed north to get there.
Is Florida really the South, though? I don't know if that's true.
We have a joke that once you cross the Georgia border, you're going north, even though you're still heading directionally south. So what was basically happening from our perspective was either refs weren't seeing when teams were crossing over defenses or just when they were backing up to shoot that we were in a safe zone. They would let teams come over and tap us. And in fact, in one of our quarters, I wish I had a video of this because we're going over the rough terrain and somebody meets us while we're crossing and both robots go vertical like an A. And then our robot starts climbing over theirs and then they backed off. But it was just interesting to me because like we're sitting there, we look down at the refs and they're all looking at like the mid zone where there are robots also, you know, beating the tar out of each other. So the awkward thing was, I think it was 3490 was in the stands right next to us. So you hear us just screaming at the top of our lungs, foul, foul, foul. What are you guys, blind? And they just kind of look over at us and just kind of like glare of like, you know, no, that's not a foul. What are you guys talking about? It's more so it's going to be one of those things that like in 2014 where the zones of possession, it's going to get easier for refs to call as the time goes on.
Yeah.
And the visibility also works. You know, we talked about the visibility from the driver station. But from the side, I'll admit that there are times if the drawbridge especially is positioned in a certain way, you can't see the defenses behind it from one side.
Yeah.
So if you got, low bar, portcullis, the low guys in the drawbridge, the refs aren't going to see if robots are doing anything in between.
Yeah.
Interesting. I actually have a question on that point that's somewhat related, but so the clear plastic dividers that are between the defenses they are absolutely impossible to see on the web stream. We saw the week 0, we saw it week half, or didn't see really. I'm curious from a field side perspective, are they really at all visible, or are they pretty much invisible there? Because I get a feeling that's what really defines the outer works, and I get a feeling that it might help the refs to have some kind of stripe or something on the edge of that, just to be able to say, okay, yeah, they actually are within the outer works or not.
If you're down at field level, if you're a ref, the ref or somebody who's standing right at the field level, you can see them. But especially because we were week half and they haven't been scuffed up and bent and destroyed yet, they are so clear. Like, that is the clearest piece of plastic I've seen in my life. Because when we were up in the stands and even watching the week zeros, I thought they didn't have the dividers out. I'm just like, oh, they just didn't put them out. That's weird. I assumed you had the whole field. And then when I got there, I'm like, wow, you don't see those at all. Which kind of helps, because if they were not clear, it'd be really boring from a perspective of a spectator.
Yep.
It's like, oh man, look at it go through that thing of wood. That's amazing.
It enters the magic box. Oh, it exits the magic box after doing one of these. Oh, great. Woo.
If it doesn't exit the magic box, call for help.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to move on to our next question here. Next question coming up. It's, okay, are low bar only ball scorers viable, or do they have to traverse multiple obstacles while scoring balls? Ooh, this is an interesting point. We didn't actually touch on this during the main show. Ty, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So low bar only, I think, is what they're getting at here, in which they mean just shooting the low goal and dumping it into the shooting the low bar and dumping it into the low goal. I don't think that they're viable. I think that there are a few matches where they'll win for sure, but I don't think that you can make a consistently competitive robot here with just doing that. I think you need to have a robot that can go over the defenses, because that's where most of the points in this game are scored.
What about if you could shoot to the high goal, if you're not just a low goal?
Well, that's where it gets. Go ahead, James.
Go ahead. Okay.
No, you.
From our perspective, like I said earlier, it's one of the reasons why we picked 44-51 over 23-93 was the multiple types of defenses they can cross. It also was very annoying from a stats thing when I watched a robot that clearly had a drivetrain that could, do at least a B or a D. When I'm just like, okay, so I would get a sheet back and I'd be like, wow, they went under that low bar 7 times. And their alliance did not get the breach. If they would have just gone over something else. And that's one of those things that from a scouting perspective, when you're looking at two teams who are equal in stats, you go, okay, well, this team understands the game better because they made sure that they crossed over a different defense when it was necessary. Yeah. So I think they're viable, and I think we're going to see one win regionals, but come district championships or championships time, if you go into an alliance, just even a random qual, and you say we can only do the low bar, you're going to get kind of a look, and then they're going to talk to you. Then when they leave, you're just going to see the coach just go, ugh.
Yeah. I think this idea of a robot, I think this robot is viable, but they have to be the best shooter of all time, and they have to be incredibly good at doing what they do, because what they do is very limited.
Wait, did we change the definition to high ball?
Well, the question didn't actually say it was only low bar. They said any low bar only ball scorers.
That's true.
Okay.
So they can score high or low. I think that you basically can't be super competitive if you go low and go under. But I think that there will be alliances that will make it to the finals with a robot that could do this at some event somewhere.
I think
it's a role player.
Looking at it from a competitive standpoint, if you're gonna do this right and just have nothing else, you're basically looking at 17-17 2012 swerve good with a shooter, and just just flying back and forth, and all you're doing is cross the low bar, swerve around a little bit, shoot, or maybe not even swerve, right? Maybe you're just going back and forth across the low bar, grab a ball, go over, shoot from the outer works, grab a ball, go over, shoot from the outer works. I think it's viable. I think you could get a lot of cycles in, but unless you're scoring a lot of points and just super consistent, you're very unlikely to get breaches, and just you got to be the best shooter out there to make that a competitive option. Viable, yes, but yeah, it's so easy. It's so easy to build a drivetrain that can go over at least something.
I could see like a robot like say like ours that we've already seen can handle most of the defenses, or 118, 16. I could see them picking that robot, and they're just like, yeah, we'll just run our cycles and just break all the defenses. You do you, you know.
Yep.
And that would happen, but come championships, they're not going to be the top of anybody's pick list. If they're like, we only watched you do the low bar. You're like, yeah, you do it great. You're the best low bar out there, but you got me 10 points, and then only 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. While this guy does, you know, cross 5, 10 for the shot, 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 10. It becomes like a point analysis. Almost. Yeah. And then if the 118 or the 16 breaks,
it's also
your
very
alliance is stranded.
It's also very predictable, right? You know exactly where they're going and where they have to go. And if you can prevent them from getting there on either side, or at least slow them down, it's a huge weak point in their play. You know, if you can corner them and keep them from being able to get to the low bar, they're not going to be able to shoot. They're not going to be able to challenge, right? And you can just play a shutdown defense, and they have so few options.
Yeah. Well, Naveed, you were saying actually. Naveed, you were saying something earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say this question kind of hints towards the opportunities for chokehold strategies in this game, which is something I really liked about 2013. And I'm really excited to see later on as the game progresses, when you have specifically robots like this that are focused on doing tasks in a very specific manner, the ability to play strong defense on them, because as the defense bot, you have prime visibility, you're playing right in front of you, you have the advantage of being able to see when a robot is coming over a defense and position yourself well. And I think come district championships, we're going to see that defensive position, especially on the 4th or 5th seed alliances, being really important for getting through the upsets.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think you're 100% right. I think that defense is going to increase as we go along, and I think that if you're not able to pick multiple spots, you're going to be in kind of a rough shape. So we'll go to our next question. Next question coming up. All right, how did having the cheval de frise, apparently, spelling. How did having the cheval de frise taken out of circulation affect the obstacle selection? So James, I'll let you talk about this. I want to talk about this after you, I think, though, too. James, I think you're muted, by the way.
Sorry, when they initially announced it, when they announced it to the audience and stuff, we all thought that they were taking away audience selection. Like, it was going to be category A until this was fixed, and everybody was getting the portcullis in the middle. That's how it initially was announced, and we were very confused. Like, that's weird, but okay. And then as soon as it switched over, we're like, okay, no, we still have the audience doing their selection thing, and we're just forced to have the portcullis. Now, the portcullis appeared to be the harder defense at the beginning, and a lot of teams had that issue with it. So it became less about us being annoyed that, like, oh, now we have to have the portcullis, and more about, okay, now we are guaranteed one tall defense. Where do we put it? You know, we know we have to deal with this right in front of us. Where does it go? Now, if that would have been the drawbridge over the Sally port, it would have been a lot more annoying because you can at least see through the portcullis. But for the most part, it didn't affect it too badly. You just now knew 2 of the defenses you were going up against as opposed to 1.
Interesting. You know, I want to say that it's kind of awkward. I know that there were a lot of folks, especially on Twitter and on the chat and all that were very upset when it broke. But I mean, it's kind of part of the game that, like, when things break, you have to to go, you have to do it. You know, unfortunately, the show must go on, even if it means that the show only includes a portcullis. Yeah, but I think Ruth actually did some analysis earlier as well. It looks like not having the cheval de frise kind of didn't end up changing too much with regard to points scored. It looks like teams that, if they had they had the portcullis and didn't have the cheval de frise, they just defeated a different obstacle instead. So from a numbers point of view, there's that. Anybody else got something to say about Mr. CDF?
I thought it was really interesting to see how they handled it, because I know, and the rest of GameSense can attest, that I was musing about, well, what happens if one of these things breaks, right? What's the plan here? And the assumption is always, well, they just take it out of the rotation. But depending on what it was, I think Cheval de Frise probably, as Ruth pointed out, didn't have a huge effect. But like, what happens if the low bar breaks? What happens if that's not a removable defense? But
it is
something else,
removable.
like,
you can take it out, and there is one spare.
Sure, but if the same thing happens to Cheval de Frise as or the same thing happens to low bar as happened to Cheval de Frise, I mean, that's a point where you basically got to stop matches and fix it. So I think there's certainly, if Sallyport had gotten taken out, as James mentioned, and you're forced into having drawbridge every match, that would have been a much bigger impact. Because there's teams that are consistently wanting to take Sallyport over drawbridge just for visibility. So it'll be interesting to see as the weeks go on. I don't think this will be the last time we'll see a defense actually break in a match. Hopefully, it's the last time we see all three of the same one go down. But this is a really, really tough game on robots and on the field.
Yeah, a lot of bashing going on. So, all right, we're gonna go to our next question here. This question here says, in a lot of matches, it seemed like robots were confused on what to do at Palmetto. Drivers were not focused on a specific task. Was there alliance communication issues or what? How did that go? So I'll touch on this before, not to cut James off because he was there, but I'll talk to it first. As I was watching the webcast, it seemed to me that this was a very typical week one and or first regional experience for a lot of teams. When people are trying to work out how the robot works, see what actually works the way they planned, and especially when it comes to like the very, very beginning events, teams are more focused on making themselves work than necessarily working as a team, because they don't even know. They don't know what they don't know yet. Does that kind of make sense? Does that kind of jive with what you were thinking a little bit, James?
Yeah, it's also a matter of the game is so new, and imagine if you were a driver who only came into first last year. This is one of the biggest swings of difference, besides 14 and 15, of two games that I've personally ever seen. So a lot of the principles you were taught are changed now. And it's also, visibility was a factor. And after talking to our drive team and stuff and watching matches, a lot of coaches were so focused on their own group and doing what you were saying, getting our robot working, making us work, making us look impressive, that there wasn't a lot of running around between coaches. And one of the things that I think a coach could learn from is, your driver can't really leave the sticks. Yes, he's allowed to by the rules, but you wouldn't want him to. You as a coach need to go, okay, we can't see what's going on and start running around to the defenses, the other alliance stations, and see if you can see what's happening. And if not, worst case scenario, look up at the Jumbotron and see maybe they're looking at my robot.
Yep.
It's regular week one. Everybody's going to figure stuff out. And even as the season goes on, week 4, week 5, we're still going to have teams doing their first ever sets of matches. It takes time to get into the flow and realize, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this.
Okay, that makes sense. Anybody else have anything to say about this particular question, or?
I think that there's this really attractiveness to pulling a successful quote-unquote audible when you're in a match. And I think I saw a lot of teams at week 0 doing that. I saw a lot of teams saying, "Oh, well, it looks like there's a ball in the way. Okay, audible, let's go do this defense." But meanwhile, that was the defense that my team was supposed to be doing, and my defense broke its arm in the previous match and literally can't do anything else except that defense. So thanks, but but I agree. I think it's a lot of, there's a flow that is yet to develop in this game. And I think that, honestly, over planning the defenses and which defenses should do which can be detrimental to the team in terms of like, okay, do this one, then do this one, do this one. I think if we talk about the ones that we can do in the alliance that we've got, then go from there. It might make more sense. But I think trying to choreograph the whole thing from the get-go could lead down a path that people don't really want to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, I just got one more thing. I think, Steph mentioned behind the scenes that she noticed teams were mostly fairly intelligent this week, especially compared to a lot of years about, being deliberate with their actions. I think compared to last year, just the visibility issues, and a lot of people, most teams will not have experienced the visibility issues. It's just going out there and trying to figure out where your robot from the stands. You're going to see lost robots, right? You're gonna see a robot and be like, well, what the heck are they doing? There's a ball right there, and of course they can't see the ball. They probably can't even see their robot, and so they're just flailing around trying to figure out where the heck they are. So I think that'll get a little bit better as the weeks go on, and certainly the top teams will continue to showcase their adeptness at knowing where exactly the robot is on the field.
Yeah.
But I see that being a big problem throughout the season.
Oh yeah. All right, we're gonna go to one last question. Oh, go ahead, James, real quick.
Before we go into that, since this wasn't asked in chat and one of my students just reminded me, we kind of discovered something while at Palmetto. If you want control of the audience selected defense, like you want to make sure that whatever you want you get, if they're going to use a little decibel meter on a phone, park your team in the center of the field as close down as possible, and it's not going to matter whether or not the whole rest of the arena yells louder than you guys. Since you're the ones closest to the decibel meter, you're getting the defense you want.
Oh, next level strategies.
Yep. 319 placed an order for 45 vuvuzelas the other day. But
if you bring any of those to any event I'm at, I will light them all on fire. I swear to God.
Maybe a flaming vuvuzela makes more noise, though. Maybe you're helping.
No. Okay. One last question here. Okay, one last question. Why would you ever bring vuvuzelas, and why are you a terrible person? Oh no, that's not okay. How will the spy bot?
No longer allowed on GameSense.
Yeah. How will the spy bot evolve going forward? Not the spy box, but the spy bot. The bot that starts in the opponent's courtyard. Naveed, why don't you lead us off here?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the defense aspect of it, but I also think that we're gonna see, as we progress in the season, more teams that choose to start their auto there, because there is potentially a consistency factor in knowing, hey, if I can shoot my high goal shot right off the bat, then perhaps that crossing over a defense, especially early on in the season when you haven't got a chance to test on the real field, I can get that shot in even if I'm not consistently able to get the cross and the shot after going over a defense. That's just a thought.
Yeah, that's true, and especially because
I think as we start seeing a lot more of the really.
Go ahead, Evan. It's all right. You're lagging.
Sorry, nobody was talking when I started talking. I think as we get later in the season, we start seeing the really upper crust teams. I mean, the top 5% of teams in the world trying to do the mythical 2-ball auto. That a large part of that is probably going to be starting as a spy bot. So the first thing you do is get your first shot off, and then race across to try and get back to the back across the defense, get your second ball, and go shoot. So I expect that.
Speaking of mythical top 5% 2-ball auto teams, I know already of a team that has a working 2-ball auto.
Where do they get the second ball from?
They start. So there's a ball basically right behind you if you start right in front of the low bar.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
you drive. So you drive forward just to the other side of the low bar, aim, fire, back up, collect, drive forward to the other side. Aim,
But if
fire.
any
Yep.
part of your robot crosses onto that other side, that's
Right.
bad news bears, right?
So
Yep.
no, if it enters the volume of the white tape, or the volume above the white tape. So the white tape's about 2 inches wide, and the diameter of the ball is about between 9 and 10. So there is a little bit of that ball sticking on the other side.
Good God.
Also a very important point, the balls can be compressed heavily. If you design right from the beginning, you can actually intake a ball with about 3 inches of compression, which gives you a much, much larger window to hit the ball than just a couple inches. I mean, it's like 6 inches, right? But, or not quite 6, I guess it would be maybe 3 or 4. But still, I mean, we've seen very, very accurate, precise autos before. It's going to be dicey. I would be impressed to see the first team that pulls it off, but nonetheless, I do expect teams are trying it, and it will be done.
3-ball
It will be
CMP. Pink team, baby.
Oh,
Triple Uber tube.
If you can do 3, if anybody has 3 balls, I will buy them a beverage of their choosing.
The whole team, or just
Oh, yeah, one person. whoever comes to me first. How's that sound?
first 10 team members.
Yes. No, I did not. I don't agree with that. That's not happening. But I think this goes back to the point that in autonomous mode, the most point-worthy thing on the field is shooting a ball in the high goal. So if you can do it, even if you can't cross the defense, you're still up in points if you can get that ball in the high goal. So
well, by most point worthy, it's also equal to just crossing a defense in auto. So
Yep.
it's tied as the most point worthy thing you can do.
hey, you're right. I can't believe I brain farted like that. You guys are chatting behind the scenes. I'm paying
What about
attention to this.
scaling?
In there.
What about
You can't
That's-
scale in auto.
Can't scale in auto.
It's against the law, sir. You cannot do that.
It is
It'd be
actually
kinda-
not against the
It's
law to
actually
scale
not
an auto.
illegal.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Why?
If you're able to propel your robot up to the bar,
Mhm.
you could technically scale in auto without breaking any of the rules, other
Somebody's
than
gonna
maybe
find
like safety.
You're the
somebody's
spy
gonna find a way
bot,
to do
okay?
like 71s, like drivetrain, but they're gonna do it on the tower and just shuffle up and then hook on.
Bunch of suction cups.
Just
Yeah.
they started as a spy bot and they just flop down and they're like 3 feet long or whatever, like 30 feet long.
No, you can't do that this year. Remember, virtually transposing onto
yes.
the.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Please tell me trying to scale your opponent's tower is a red card. I'm not remembering right now. Because if it isn't, then you can deny a team potentially a capture
What it's not a red card, but if
if it's
you
strategic.
No. Remember, there's a rule that says in the last 20 seconds, if
Yeah,
an
yeah.
opponent's
They both,
robot in your courtyard contacts you, they get
Yes.
credit for a scale on an
Okay.
open face of the tower.
Yeah.
That's
So you're essentially giving them a free 15 points.
never mind.
Can't touch this.
All right. Well, hey everybody, thank you so much, James, for joining us this evening, and thanks for answering these questions with us. For the
No
folks in
problem.
the chat that sent in all these questions, thank you so much. We can only pick a few, but thank you again for doing it, and thank you for watching GameSense Episode 2. We'll be back next week, 9 p.m. Eastern, again with the same show, talking about what happened in Week 1 and how this game begins to develop as we start to play more than just 1 or 2 events, as we start to go into, I think there's 16 events, plus Israel will be going on while we'll be at the same day as GameSense is going on next week. So there'll be 17 events in progress before next week. Kind of crazy to think about it, eh? Back in my day, there were only like 25 events in all of first. But, all right, well, with that, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and good luck at Week 1. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Good night.